Review shows. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and Yahoo Sports Australia, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. We're looking at the Memphis Grizzlies today, as I mentioned, looking at their season in review. A extraordinarily interesting team who had that playoff spot all but locked up and then didn't make it because of the play-in game, and they may not have made it anyway if we didn't have the coronavirus pandemic going on. Which gonna play my new one.
Ooh, it's a pandemic.
It sure is. So yeah, an interesting season, but they're a team that's really exciting in terms of the level of players they've got, the young players they've got, the analytics type players that they've got. They're just a very, very interesting squad, and one that potentially is ripe for maybe a bit of overdrafting as well, which is something that we're going to talk about. Got some questions that came through on Instagram and on Twitter. First one here. Enzo Lin says, do you think Ja Morant can make the first to second year jump like Trae Young and Luka Doncic? Do I think he can make that level of jump? No, I don't. Now, he didn't start off anywhere near the same level of those two guys, I don't believe. He had a really, really strong season, but he averaged 18 and 7. He didn't average Trae Young numbers. He didn't average Luka Doncic numbers. He was the 74th ranked player. He played 31 minutes. So there is obviously room for improvement. Will he become a top 10 player? I would be highly skeptical of Morant. We're going to talk about him quite a bit later. Or quite a bit later on. James DY says, is Brandon Clarke a top 40 guy who could be drafted in the top 60? Now, Brandon Clarke, again, was a player who was really impressive as a rookie. 104th ranked player in just 22 minutes a night. There's absolutely zero chance that I would draft him in the top 60. No way. Can he be a top 40 guy? Maybe at some point in his career he can do that, because we know how ridiculously efficient he is. The problem I'm having with Clarke here is getting those minutes behind Jaren Jackson and Jonas Valenciunis, and the fact that his defensive numbers didn't carry over from college, which were extraordinarily high. And that was one of the reasons why I thought he'd be the third best fantasy rookie this season, and he was right on track for that mark. I think Kendrick Nunn jumped ahead of him. Actually, I'm not even sure Kendrick Nunn finished ahead of him. I think Clarke might be in that mix for the third best rookie. So he's right in that area, but top 60 is just way overdrafting. It's just overthinking things too much. It's just thinking, well, he's going to take this big step forward, so I'll draft him at the absolute peak of where I think he's going to be, and the median outcome there, the mean result, is just not going to be in that area. So no, you wouldn't want to do that. Amazing says, how good will Valenciunis be? Will his usage remain similar? He only had a 21 usage during the season, so it wasn't like it was super high. It did kick up in the bubble a little bit, but not massively. He was the best fantasy player on this team, the 53rd ranked player. He played under 27 minutes a night, and he's just outside the top 50 for the season. No reason to think he can't be at least close to that. He's 28 years of age. I would expect maybe a marginal downturn, but he wasn't doing it playing 31 minutes a night. 26 minutes a night, no worries that he could continue to play that amount and be that 50 to 70 ranked player again for at least one more year, would be my guess. And Raul Coelho says, will Valenciunis take more threes this coming season? He attempted 1.3 per game. I'd love him to. I think that he can hit them. He hit them at 34% this season. I'm not confident that he will, though. I think he's sort of pretty comfortable in what he's doing, especially with the amount of threes that Jaren Jackson is taking. So I wouldn't expect a huge change there from Jonas Valenciunis. Let's flip it over now and have a look at some Twitter questions that you guys sent through. Wojciech Berent says, do you think that they will re-sign DeAnthony Melton? How will they pay him? I think they'd like to re-sign him, but they also were a little bit disappointed in how and I was too, in how he played in the bubble. That was somewhat of a concern. Grayson Allen clearly overtook his role in that area, and they've still got Tyus Jones around, who didn't play at all in the bubble. I I think that it depends on what sort of offer came in. If someone gave him 336, I reckon they might say thanks but no thanks. And I could see that offer coming in for Melton. I think he's really good. But in terms of his role for next season, I'm not sure how much bigger it's going to be. A lot of things worked in his favour to get some extra minutes down the stretch. And there's a lot of players competing for that playing time this year. How much and what role will Justice Winslow play? He didn't play at all for Memphis this year. Obviously, only the 11 games for Miami, and he was not that good. He was slated to be the starting small forward for this team, and I think that is what the team's expectation will be once he is fit and healthy and ready to go for the 2020-2021 season. Probably a 30-minute a night role, 31-minute a night role. Let's just be clear, he's not that good. He's not this massive top 50, top 60 fantasy player. I don't think he's ever been a top 100 player. Too many shooting concerns and needs the ball in his hand, which he won't be getting in Memphis. And I think that's going to limit his overall upside. Jonathan Chown, what are your thoughts on the non-junior Porter? Jonte, seems like he's fallen off a lot of radars. I wonder if he could be a sneaky add in Dynasty. Now, I like Jonte Porter a lot. He was a guy that I was super interested in coming out of college. Of course, multiple ACL injuries, but he did get signed by the Grizzlies at the end of the season. We haven't seen him in the NBA yet, but let's harken back to what he did in his time in college. He played in 25 minutes a night coming off the bench from Missouri. He averaged only 10 points, but he had a big rebound rate, 7 rebounds a game. He blocked 1.7 shots. He got a steal per game. He hit 36% from 3. He was a good free throw shooter. So what he is a stretch 5. He's 6'11", a stretch 5 who can rebound, who can block shots, who can play defense, and he can pass. There's a lot to like about Jonte Porter. Can he ever be healthy? I have significant doubts about that. Can he ever be a starter? I think we've got to have real doubts about that. He hasn't played since 2018, so we're going to be talking 3 years since he last set foot on the court. Really, by the time he's cranking up, there's a team with Valenciunis and Clarke and Jaren Jackson ahead of him, and Gorgie Jeng's still there. He's really not going to play this year. I think you'd have to be in a pretty deep league to be valuing Jonte, but I do like him. Zadinamo Bez Mamicha says, can we expect Porter and Concha? When can we expect Porter and Concha on the rotation? I think it's probably 2-3 years away. Concha is a real massive analytics type player whose numbers are always good and he performs fantastically when he's on the court. He's already 24 though, so having him in a large rotation role is probably unlikely to ever happen, to be honest. And if it would happen, be a couple of years away. Nurkic Circus says Ja Morant is going to pass Kyle Lowry and CP3 and ADP this year for redraft leagues. Should he? Will he? Is the question. I don't necessarily think that he will. You're talking about Lowry and Chris Paul as third-round players, Ja Morant as a seventh-round player this year. Are we going to get those guys flip that much? Morant did take some steps up in the bubble. He was the 52nd ranked player because he played 38 minutes a night. I think that there is a chance that he jumps ahead of those guys. There's no doubt about that, and he almost will. I think I probably would just the injury risk of those other two, the age-related decline risk of those other two, plus the fact that Morant could step up, would probably lead me to take Ja there, but he's a potential risk of overdrafting for sure. Do I think Oscar Gonzalez do I think they can make the playoffs? I think there's obviously improvement in them for next season. But we have to remember the Warriors are going to be back. The Suns are going to be pushing as well. So there's 2 extra teams who didn't make the playoffs looking to get in. Who out of the playoff teams probably falls out? Could Portland fall out? Perhaps. The Lakers, the Clippers, the Nuggets, they're not falling out. Obviously, the Rockets, they're probably not falling out. The Jazz, they're probably not falling out. The Mavericks, they're not falling out. It's a tough battle in the Western Conference, and the odds would say that they probably don't make the playoffs. Jesus Walker, who starts at the 3, Kyle Anderson or Justice Winslow? I am pretty confident that it will be Justice Winslow. This team also doesn't have their first round pick. That pick 14 is going to the Boston Celtics from that Jeff Green trade years and years ago, so they don't have that pick coming up in the draft. Other questions coming in here before we head into looking at these players a little bit more. Let's have a look. Will Brandon Kaiser, will Triple J be out for the whole year? No, he won't. It's not even appearing that he'll miss any time, to be honest. He did have that knee injury, but there's no expectation that he will miss next season at all. Matt Lawson, NBA Dynasty ADP. Are you buying or selling these Dynasty ADPs? Ja Morant is at 18. That's pretty high for Morant. That's expecting a lot of improvement from where he was. I think that look, I think he can obviously get there, but next season, the year after, it might be a stretch, and maybe he never gets there. I reckon that's a little high. Jaren Jackson at 24 is probably a little bit high as well. Brandon Clarke at 60 sounds about right. Valenciunis at 67 sounds about right. Dylan Brooks at 116, you can take that as much as you want. There's no way that I want anything to do with Dylan Brooks at 116. And Justice Winslow at 172. There's maybe a little bit of bargain value there in Justice, but he's not a high value player. D'Anthony Melton at 181. I reckon that might be pushing it a little bit too much. Joshie Jackson at 243. I don't believe in Jackson. Tyus Jones at 232. I don't really see him pushing into top 150 ever. So I think I'd be okay with that for a couple more years. And Jonte at 267, probably too high for a bloke who there's a legitimate chance just never plays in the NBA at all. So it's probably a little bit high there for Jonte Porter. Guys, got through all the questions. We're going to talk about these players in a little bit more detail in a sec. But before I do that, erectile dysfunction, man, talking about it is not easy. I'm used to talking about it. I used to be a pharmacist. I could talk about these problems with people all day, but that's not the same for everybody. Sometimes people they brush it off. Oh, it's just a hard day. I'm stressed. I'm tired. Don't worry about it, love. It's never happened before, but we all know that this is an actual medical condition. It's not a reflection on your masculinity. It's not a reflection on the attractiveness of your partner. It's just a medical concern, and sometimes dealing with those medical problems can be really tough. With Roman, it's easy to talk about. You get to speak to a real healthcare professional who can prescribe real medication. It's simple, it's safe, and it's totally discreet. With Roman, you get a free online evaluation and ongoing care for ED, all from the comfort and privacy of your home. Erectile dysfunction used to be tough to tackle, but now there's Roman. Complete an online visit today to connect with a health professional and to take care of it. So if you go to getroman.com/lockedonnba today, and if approved, you'll get $15 off your first order of erectile dysfunction treatment. That's getroman.com/lockedonnba. getroman.com/lockedonnba. All right, moving on now to talk about these players in a little bit of that extra detail. As I said, the number one player on the Grizzlies for fantasy this year was Jonas Valenciunis. I think people would be a little bit surprised that the JV was at number one there. He was the 53rd ranked player for the season. A guy that, I've been talking about Jonas Valenciunis as a really good fantasy option for a long time. A player that if you give him 30 minutes a night, he's going to put up really big numbers. And the problem has always been getting to that 30-minute a night area. He didn't get there again this season, but he had probably his best overall fantasy season. Plus 1.98 PIPM is a strong number. 2.6 Raptor, a 63 true shooting, a 21 usage. Yeah, a lot of really strong numbers for Valenciunis. 15 and 11, one block a game, half a three. The reason he is as high as he is the strong rebounding and the really good field goal percentage. There is two big numbers, the field goal percentage and the rebounds. And I don't really see his efficiency dropping off all that much, nor his rebounds. Would he play 25 instead of 26 minutes next year? I think that's a legitimate chance. So I think at his age, with the guys like Morant and Clarke pushing up, he's not old. He's only 28, but he's 7 years older than Jaren Jackson. So, would he be a 53rd ranked player again next season? I think that's probably unlikely when we're talking about Valenciunis. But I still think that he's a really good player who can be a really solid 7th round sort of fantasy player for at least another year or two. Let's talk about Jaren Jackson now, because he was a guy that was hyped up in a lot of places. I talked about him quite a bit as maybe a 4th round guy. He didn't quite live up to that, just back into the 5th, the 60th ranked player. 0.18 PIPM. Disappointing negative 1.5 Raptor, a 59 true shooting with a usage of 24. And the biggest improvement to me there was his usage of 24 going up. He played 29 minutes a night. Fouls can still be a problem. 4 fouls per those 29 minutes, so that was a concern. He averaged 17 points, really strong. 2.5 threes on 6.5 attempts is massive for a big man. 39% is great. 1.6 blocks is pretty good. We'd hope for a bit more in his efficiency, 47 and 75%. I think that can get to 50 and 80 at some point. But the really disappointing part in his game is rebounding. He just cannot rebound. 4.6 rebounds per game with 1.4 assists. Like, that 4.6 rebounds is really, really bad. In the bubble, his minutes went absolutely through the roof. 37 minutes a night in 3 games before the knee injury. He averaged 25 points per game. He had a 25 usage. He hit 3 threes per game at 36%. He was just bombing. 1.7 blocks. He had 48 and 80 from the field and from the line, so I think that's a realistic expectation. But 2.7 rebounds? Now, people hate big men that can't rebound. You're 7 foot. You can't even grab a rebound. So that is always going to reduce his appeal to people. He was the 18th ranked player in the bubble, despite grabbing 2.7 rebounds as a big man. Now, he is not a big man like a Brook Lopez in the past or a Robin Lopez in the past who doesn't rebound and then creates other rebounding opportunities for others. It is a real issue that he doesn't grab rebounds for his overall play. There's no doubt about that. That is a concern. But he still was able to be the 18th ranked player grabbing less rebounds than Lou Williams. I don't know if that's actually true, but it's got to be pretty close to what Lou Williams grabbed. He was still that good because he's a high usage player who blocks shots, who has good efficiency. These are all excellent things for fantasy. And 4.3 fouls in 37 minutes is so much more encouraging than where he was. I would be highly doubtful that he doesn't play 32 minutes a night this upcoming season. And I think we're looking at a third round player almost undoubtedly. Can he be a 20 point per game guy with close to 2 blocks on 48 and 80, shooting 2.7 to 3.3 threes a game? Yeah, I think that's absolutely where we can expect Jaren Jackson Jr. to get to. I love his long-term value. I think he's going to be a top 20 staple for many years to come. The dude just turned 21 as well, and he's got 2 NBA seasons under his belt. So there's still a lot of improvement to come. Will he ever get to be a 9 rebound per game guy? I would say absolutely not. Can he push from 4 a game to 7 a game? Best case scenario? Well, maybe. And then we're talking about a top 12 fantasy player, potentially. And if he gets to 9, then the top 12 is a lock. You hope he gets to 24 points, 3 threes, 2 blocks, 50 and 80. Those are all numbers to be a top 20 staple. Anything you add on to that, a steal, 3 assists, 8 rebounds, anything bonus on that is just that. It's a bonus. So really, really strong stuff from Jackson. I think the advanced stuff is still going to continue to improve. Defensively, he's not quite as good as I thought he'd be at this point, but I still think there's room for improvement. But offensively, he's been unbelievably good, and you're putting up some really, really good numbers here to boot. Now the name that everyone wants to hear about, and that's Ja Morant. He was the 74th ranked player this year, 0.01 PIPM, which is pretty good for a rookie. Negative 1.1 Raptor, again, a negative player, which is not a great thing, same as Jaren Jackson. 56 true shooting, 26 usage. Over the course of the season, in 31 minutes, he averaged 18, 4, and 7. The problem with his numbers here, it's not the 48% shooting, which is significantly better than I thought it would be. The 78 from the line, which is pretty strong. Good, massively good free throw attempt rate. He attempted 4.6 per game. 34% from 3. Yeah, that's pretty good numbers for a rookie and who's not a good shooter. But the volume, man, 0.9 threes. He attempted 2.7 per game. That is what holds him back. 0.9 steals. That is what holds him back. Get those threes to 2 a game. Get those steals to 1.3 per game. Get your scoring to 24 point per game, and then you are talking top 20 players. But those other things are holding him back. Now, in the bubble, he played 38 minutes a night. He averaged 21 points. He did start to take more threes, 5.1 per game. So that is a massively encouraging thing from Morant. He went from 2.7 to 5.1. That's a huge difference. And still didn't hit them at 26%, but that increased volume was a bonus. He averaged 6 rebounds and 10 assists, but no steals. 0.4. He also shot only 41% from the field, so that is somewhat of a concern there. His 2-point shooting dropped off as well. So he's got to balance all these things together. 38 minutes a night was massive as they were pushing for the playoffs. He won't do that. But remember, they also went pretty easy on him in the regular season because he was coming off that knee injury. He should be a 34, 35 minute a night player. He should be a 20 and 8 sort of a player. I think he can be a 6 rebound guy. I think he can average 1.5 threes. He's just got to get to 1.2, 1.3 steals, and he pushes into that second, third round mix. I think safely he's a 3rd to 4th round guy next year, but it is going to depend on what happens in those key categories. The 3-point volume, the steals, and what happens with his field goal percentage. So, yeah, really encouraging stuff from Morant in the bubble, of course, but there's still some areas to look at. Of course, his future's super bright. He's going to push up and probably be a top 20 player in the next couple of years. Maybe he never gets that Dynasty ADP of 18, though, and just hovers in the 20 to 30 range. I think there is a risk of that. I would bet that he is a top 20 player in a few years, but back-end top 20. Top 10, I'm not 100% sure on him. There's still those things that need to be proven. Can he hit threes? Can he get steals? Because they're the things that are really going to determine that. If you want to determine the best tasting protein bar in the world, don't worry about it because I've already determined it for you. It is Built Bar. They are back with new flavors, 6 newbies to go along with the 12 OG flavors. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Try out the new caramel brownie flavor, cherry barcia, lemon almond cheesecake, carrot cake, apple almond crisp, and of course cookies and cream. They're your 6 new guys to go with the 12 OGs, including banana bread, salted caramel, and orange. These are great if you're looking to lose weight or just maintain your current chiseled physique and looking for a protein bar that doesn't taste like you scraped it off the bottom of your shoe. These are low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and high fiber protein bars. Great for maintaining that weight or losing the weight that you've packed on because you haven't been allowed outside over the last 6 months. The Cherry Barcia bar, new one, 17 grams of protein, 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar. And if you go to builtbar.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON, you'll get $10 off your next order. So use that promo code locked on, save yourself $10 at builtbar.com and get your hands on the best tasting protein bars that you can find. Next up on my list for the Grizzlies, we are looking at Brandon Clarke, who really lived up to most expectations that I had. I thought that they would play him about this much. I thought that he'd be around the top 100, and he did that. He was the 104th ranked player. Plus 0.54 PIPM, great for a rookie, plus 0.9 Raptor, 66 true shooting, 19% usage. Averaged 12 and 6 with half a 3, half a steal, and 0.8 blocks. Why was he as good as he was? Because the field goal percentage was ridiculous. 62%, just one of the best exponents of the floater range shot in the NBA as a rookie. Doesn't really take many threes, 1.2 per game, but hit them at 39%. He's got to start stretching that out and be making that a weapon in his arsenal. Probably should hit the button.
Giggity!
Yep. He's got to be able to do that. The worry there is, like Zion Williamson, one of the reasons he came in so highly touted and loved by analytics models were insane defensive numbers. And the numbers were less than insane. In fact, some might say they were quite sane. 0.8 blocks and 0.5 steals is not good enough. If they come back and he starts getting 1.6 blocks and 1.5 steals, then shit, the top 40 is in range, even in limited minutes. I think for next year, you're going to get 30 plus of Jaren Jackson. You're going to get 30 plus of Jackson. You're going to get 25 of Valenciunis, and you're going to get Clarke and Jeng mopping it up. Ideally, they'd want Jackson and Clarke to be their 4-5 combination. I'm not sure how that works in terms of rebounding expertise because neither of them are good rebounders. So there is some element of risk in running that for long combinations together. But Clarke has a lot of upside. Now, he is 24. So he's not super young. He's 3 years older than Jackson and Moran. Interesting, Jackson and Moran are the same age, despite the extra year in the league for Jackson. Clarke in the bubble, averaged 13 and 6. He did get to 0.7 steals and 0.9 blocks. Still not quite there. Hit his 61% from the field. Hit his 35% from 3 on limited attempts. So there's still a lot of room for improvement in what he can do. And we haven't seen it occur just yet. I do like what he can do, but I worry that his long-term output isn't quite at the same level of Jackson and Morant because he is those 3 years older. And is he a guy you want 32 minutes a night at center? Probably not. He's probably more of a 27, Jonas Valenciunis minutes guy, 26, 27, 28 minute a night center, who, if the defensive numbers come, then the top 50, he'll smash a shit out of that because his efficiency is already there. He can score. I think he can hit some threes, but if it's the defensive numbers that really need to come in here for Brandon Clarke. I like him. I loved him a lot coming into the draft. I had him number 4 in my Dynasty rookie ranks. I'd have him probably maybe even 3 at this point. Maybe I'd have Tyler Hero way up there. Maybe I should do my Dynasty re-rank rookies coming up at some point as well. I did it after the shutdown of the season. I'll probably do another one coming up. But Clarke, just lived up to really most expectations that we could have had for him coming in as a rookie.
Go, 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 go. Who's next?
Who's next is Dylan Brooksy Brooks, the 159th ranked player. That's why I just hated that Dynasty ADP number for him. Brooks is almost 25. He played 29 minutes a game. He averaged 16 points, 2 threes, but 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.4 blocks, 41 and 81, shooting 36% from 3. He is one of the most infuriating players to watch. His usage was at 25%. He had a true shooting of 51%. His usage was higher than Jaren Jackson, higher than Jonas Valenciunis, marginally below Ja Morant, and it really shouldn't be because he's not good. And then in the bubble, it went up to 26%. This is a guy who he sucks. He's not good. Negative 1.06 PIPM, negative 1 Raptor. You're struggling when you are putting up a negative PIPM, playing with Jackson, playing with Morant, playing with Valenciunis, who are all positives in that area. And you are still the guy that sucks. Your inability to understand what a good shot is the concern. His inability to do literally anything outside of score. Can't rebound, can't assist, doesn't get steals, inefficient from the field. He hits some threes. His best fantasy category was 3-pointers. We can find that anywhere. In fact, we can find that on the waiver wire, which is exactly where you should be finding Dillon Brooks. Maybe I'm a hater. Maybe he's going to be better. Is he though? Is he really? Maybe. He did have some okay moments in the bubble. He averaged 20 points per game and he played 33 minutes, but that's just way too much. He shouldn't be playing that many minutes. Again, he didn't do anything else apart from score and hit threes. And if you need scoring and threes, then by all means, as a later round pick, he's probably going to get those opportunities. But Justice Winslow's probably going to take some of his minutes. Surely D'Anthony Melton can take some. Maybe they see Josh Jackson in that role. I don't really think they do. On this roster, there isn't really that guy who's going to take those minutes away from him, unfortunately. Grayson Allen had some moments in the bubble, but it doesn't look like he's going to get that. But Brooks' ceiling is really capped because he can't do anything apart from score. And that's what we've got to look at with him. He is, again, 25, so he's not super old, but he's also not ridiculously young. I don't really see him having massive improvements in the future. I think he's quite a negative on the court when you've got other good players out there like Jackson and like Morant who should be getting more of those shots when Dillon Brooks decides to take over. He was also a player that signed that contract extension. Now, you want to talk contract year players. He was putting up some really big scoring numbers and then he signed a contract extension and then things just disappeared. He couldn't hit anything. He really did fall off. He is good for being a double-digit scorer. You get that, and he hits threes. His last 2 games in the bubble, 51 points and 8 threes. It's really good. He just does nothing else. So in a points league, I imagine his value is higher than it is in a categories league because we know how points leagues skew towards scoring most of the time. But overall, I don't want to bank on this guy as a starting shooting guard who's going to continue to improve and is going to get 30 minutes a night as we move forward. As his team gets good, that is the position they're going to want to improve because Morant, Jackson, Valenciunis, Clarke, even Winslow at the 3, they probably want to upgrade that spot, to be honest. But Brooks is, to me, the guy that you're looking to upgrade more from. I just don't buy his I'm the best player on this team when you're maybe the 5th best player on the team mentality. That, to me, is not a winning formula, and we haven't really seen that be a winning formula for Dillon Brooks so far. All right, the next player that we look up here is Gorgui Dieng, 174.
Who's next?
Gorgui Dieng is that player that we know that if he starts, he is a fantasy must-add player. We've seen it so many times from Dieng. He was really strong in his advanced stuff, a big Raptor of 2.4, plus 0.51 PIPM, 57 true shooting, came across from Minnesota, slid into that backup center role, and put up some pretty good numbers. Averaged 7 and 6 in his 17 minutes with a block and a steal per game. Now, in 17 minutes, it's fine. That's barely, it's outside the top 150, but it's in 17 minutes. You play him in 26 minutes and he's a top 70 player, and that's just what he's going to be. He started to hit threes at a higher volume, 36% there, attempting 42% of his shots from 3, which in the past, last year he was 15% from 3. 3 years ago, he was 7% from 3. So he said, well, shit, I can actually shoot threes, which I've been talking about for this guy for ages. And he started taking them, he started making them, and it didn't really affect his overall output that much. And his efficiency did drop, but his true shooting went from 57 to 57. It didn't change because of the overall value of those 3-point shots. He did see a bit of a dip in his free throw percentage. He's normally been an 80% guy. He was down to 77. We saw his block rate really spike to a huge degree. He had the highest per 36 block rate in the last 5 years this year. But the opportunities there for Dieng just aren't really around. He is also, over 30 now? So room for improvement's not there. No one's going to be banking on him or counting on him to be a starting center in a trade or anything like that. So yeah, the decline is going to kick in for Gorgie Dieng, but he's always that name to watch as a backup option, because if the opportunity arises, he will put up some highly efficient numbers, who now can hit threes and can block shots and can be a really good rebounder. Just a name to watch and understand that he is on this team. D'Anthony Melton, the wave pool. 190th ranked player this year, massive advanced numbers, 1.83 PIPM, 2.2 Raptor. True shooting was terrible, 50%, 19 usage is okay. He had good opportunities and didn't really take hold of them. A guy whose value is really dependent on his steal rate. He averaged 1.3 steals in 19 minutes. He got you 7.5 points with half a three. It's really just steals. 77 from the line, 29% from three. Like, these are terrible shooting numbers. I think he can be an okay shooter, but not a great one. He can block shots. He can pass a little bit. I really love what he does defensively. He impacts winning a lot, but he needs more than 19 minutes to be a fantasy relevant player. He looks to be one of those guys whose fantasy rank will always be inflated by the steal numbers, which is always something you have to be careful of. And there's a lot of other areas for his game to improve in. The thing with Melton is he's such a good player on the court and such an impactfully winning player that you feel like he's got a role moving forward. Now, next to Morant, next to Jackson, I really like him in that role. Playing some defense, being able to handle the ball as well as a secondary ball handler. I really like it. In fact, I think it fits better than Dylan Brooks, who, again, is just taking shots away from better players. But Melton's a restricted free agent. We don't know if he's going to be back. I think teams should be making a play for him. He can be a Patrick Beverley, a better Patrick Beverley, I believe. Yeah, so teams who are good, who are looking for that guy, the Bucks, could they make a play for him to take on the Wes Matthews role, maybe cut into Donte DiVincenzo's minutes? I always say the Bucks, but there's so many opportunities for Melton to be a really good player on a good team. The shooting, though, is really rough. I do believe it can improve. He's still only, 22 as a restricted free agent? That's super early to be hitting restricted free agency. I'd be looking to give him 10 plus a year as a franchise. No doubt about that. I think there's some real value in him. His fantasy upside, though, is a little bit limited just because of the lack of shooting, the lack of offense, and really, at this point, the lack of opportunities that have been afforded to D'Anthony Melton. Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson, another one of those players who is really low usage. He was the 219th ranked player with 13 usage, negative 0.2 Raptor, negative 0.69 PIPM. Hit the music.
Giggity!
But yeah, look, with Winslow around, with Melton and Brooks playing some of those minutes at the three, Anderson's not going to have these opportunities again. 20 minutes a game. Yeah, Jay Crowder starting in front of him. He's going to have Winslow next year. He's a guy that relies almost entirely on his ability to be a high field goal percentage player and get defensive numbers. But if you're just not playing enough minutes, which Kyle Anderson probably won't, you're just not going to get those opportunities. Now, he's only 27 years of age. I think that he's still got some value as a rotation player, but any hopes of him being a top 100 guy in the future are probably cooked. Let's go to Tyus Jones, the 219th ranked player. I think I said Anderson was 219th. He was actually 218th. Jones played 19 minutes, 7 points, 4.5 assists, 0.9 steals, 46 and 74, shooting 38% from 3 on 17 usage. Neutral PIPM, negative 0.3 Raptor. He's a pretty good player. Didn't see him in the bubble at all. He's a guy that I would love to have seen get an opportunity as a starting point guard somewhere. Really careful with the ball. Can shoot it at times. He's been up and down with his shooting in his career. Pretty good steal rate. That's a massively good assist rate, 4.4 in 19 minutes. And you can extrapolate that for him to be a 7 assist guy if he was a 30-minute-a-night player. But there are a lot of holes in his game. He's a very low usage player. He doesn't take many risks with the ball, which we look at that and go, look at that assist to turnover ratio. That's fantastic. But sometimes you need high turnovers to be an actual creator. Look at Luka Doncic. Look at James Harden. These guys are creators. They are LeBron James. These are guys creating for others and throwing those risky passes that are going to get turned over at times. And also remember, turnovers are one of the worst fantasy category, but they're also, not all turnovers are created equal. Live turnovers versus dead ball turnovers are very, very different situations. So sometimes dead ball turnovers aren't necessarily a huge loss as opposed to live turnovers that cause transition plays. Jones is an impediment to what Melton can do. because he's in that guy that's taking some of those minutes. Now, Melton's probably considered more of a 2 than a 1, and Jones is really key for this team. And they did miss him in the bubble for sure. Guys like Allen and Melton weren't able to fill that role. So he's a player that's probably got some capped upside. If Morant goes down, he'll get you 7 assists, probably with 7 points. And that has some value for him. He's 24, still really young, but do we expect him to continue to get significantly better? Probably not. Or ever be a long-term starting point guard? It probably appears that that's not going to be the case for him at this point in his NBA future development. The next player up is Justice Winslow, 224th ranked player this year, only played 11 games, all for Miami. He averaged 11 points. He was this bad because he is this bad. Maybe it's not this bad, but he's not good. 39% from the field, 67 from the line, 22 from 3, 0.6 steals, 0.5 blocks. The reason he was even this high was he had 4 assists per game. He was a negative 1.29 PIPM. He had 44 true shooting. Now, he can be better than this. He can shoot a little bit better than this, but he needs the ball in his hands. And with Jackson out there and with Brooks playing, he's just not going to get that many opportunities. He's not going to get the opportunities that he was afforded in Miami, where he was starting at point guard for chunks of the time. And I think that's, if you got to play off him and make him a spot-up shooter, then there's real worries about what the hell he's going to be able to do in that role. I still think he's got room for improvement. He's only 24. He's going to be better than this next year. I don't know if he's going to be a top 100 player, but we saw a player with similar shooting profile, Brandon Ingram, take big steps forward. But that is why that Brandon Ingram season was the big outlier, because it just doesn't happen for most guys, in nearly every guy. And Winslow's probably going to fall into that category. I'm super excited, or interested maybe is more accurate, to see what he does, to see how he plays this coming season and how they use him and how much he gets the ball in his hands. The 6.6 assists and rebounds and 4 assists per game is strong. The lack of defensive numbers is worrisome. The poor shooting is worrisome. How he's going to fit in terms of usage is all worrisome. But he does have some upside. Some of his projection numbers look pretty good. And I think he's going to be a draftable player. Getting too high on him is probably going to be a mistake, though. The next player up on my list here is Josh Jackson, a player that, I've been pretty critical of, rightfully so, because he's been shithouse. He played quite a lot in the G League this year, and his numbers were astonishingly good, really. 20 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.6 steals, 1.5 blocks. Still didn't shoot the ball well, 63 from the line, but hit 38% from 3 on 6.5 attempts in the G League. In the NBA, 9 points, 3 rebounds, 17 minutes, 0.9 steals, 44 and 70 with 32% shooting. Yeah, not quite as exciting. 55 true shooting for his time in the NBA. A +3 Raptors, absolutely intriguing. But then we saw in the bubble, with no Winslow, with no Tyus Jones, Josh Jackson played 6 minutes a night. He averaged 2 points. I'm not really sure that the Grizzlies value him all that highly. He is an unrestricted free agent after the Suns declined his rookie option. Would they like to bring him back? I think, given the fact that they've got Morant, there's Brooks, they could be bringing Melton back, there's Jones, there's Allen, I would be a bit skeptical of Josh Jackson coming back on this team. He has never really shown to be a winning player. Those numbers in the G League where he put up these big defensive numbers and he handled the ball, it was the hope for him coming out of Kansas, but he's never shown that in the NBA, really, outside of a few stretches with Phoenix where they said, everyone's injured, Josh, you are running everything. And I get the feeling that's what happened in the G League. And when he's forced to be in a different scenario where, Josh, you're the 4th player, you're the 5th option, then he just doesn't really know how to do it. And he doesn't know how to contribute at that level. And I think there's going to be no team that goes, you know what our offense is, guys? Give it to Josh Jackson and get the fuck out of the way, because I don't think anybody's going to have that thought process. So that's going to really limit his overall value and overall upside. Joshy Jackson, not a player that I'm super interested in. His G League PRPM through the roof. 2.94 is a massive number. Those numbers are fantastic, but it's a bit worrisome that it just never translates to the NBA. And even with some injuries and poor form in the bubble, he just didn't get an opportunity. So I don't think the Grizzlies are really viewing him that highly at this stage. Grayson Allen, the 301st ranked player. PRPM and Raptor were bad. Negative 2.41 PRPM, 1.4 Raptor negative. True shooting 61% is a great number for Grayson Allen. And I thought in the bubble he was pretty good. 120th ranked player, 12 points, 2.7 threes. But if I'm going to criticize Dylan Brooks for doing nothing else apart from scoring, Grayson Allen does nothing else apart from score. 2.7 rebounds, 1 assist, 0.6 steals. He hit 2.7 threes, which is a good number, at 47%. His true shooting was at 67 in the bubble, a number which has got no chance of being able to stick. But what else is he doing? He's also 25. He's older than Brooks and Brandon Clarke, and older than D'Anthony Melton, and older than Josh Jackson. He's older than John Concha. Like, he's not a young player. And they are all concerns there with him. The advanced stuff doesn't really love him, as I've already mentioned. His presence maybe is an issue for D'Anthony Melton and his chances of coming back, but it's just another guard to go with the Brooks, Morant, Jones, Melton quartet. Where does Allen fit in there? And again, that puts a further risk on Jackson. Maybe that's why I do think that Melton has a real chance of leaving this team, because there's just too many guys around in that position. And they did love what they saw from Allen in the bubble with those 27 minutes a night and 12 points per game. Unbelievable shooting. I thought he looked pretty good most of the time. Still got defensive concerns, and we worry about what else he's going to be able to do. And that's going to always limit, I believe, his overall fantasy upside. Let's look now at the next guy on my list, which is, if we go down to it, it is Johnny Concha, the 364th ranked player. Concha didn't play a huge amount. He played 4 games in the bubble, but overall he played 19 games, under 10 minutes, 3 points. But 0.4 steals, 1.2 assists, 65% shooting is really why he ended up being ranked that high. And didn't do much in the bubble. What we love from him is his G League numbers, where he averaged 12 points. But as a guard, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.8 steals, and 0.7 blocks. His shooting is the concern, 33% from 3 on only 2.7 attempts, but he is a player that always seems to impact winning. When he's on the court, things go well. And I said that Josh Jackson's G League POPM was good. Well, he was beaten by a player on his own team, because Concha had a 3.13. He makes shit happen. He is really good. The problem is the shooting and the offense and the low usage. What the hell position is he? He's a shooting guard that gets rebounds and plays defense. In that D'Anthony Melton type role. I really like what Concha can do in terms of, if he gets an opportunity, he's just going to fill up the stat sheet outside of scoring. I'm just not really confident that he's going to get those opportunities that he would need to be able to put up the numbers that we require. I still think that he's worth a lot more than a bunch of other two-way guys in terms of dynasty hold value, but I'm not really sure that his NBA career is going to be all that successful, personally. Anthony Tolbert, one of the worst players in the NBA this year, 388th ranked fantasy player, negative 2.75 PIPM and negative 2.5 Raptor. This dude is 35 years of age. He's brought in to hit threes. He hit 34%. That's all he does. Not really convinced that he's going to be any sort of guy that's around long term. He's an unrestricted free agent, and I don't think he's going to be troubling us in fantasy really all that much. Marko Goodrich, 412th ranked player, had an opportunity to take some minutes away from Dylan Brooks because he could allegedly shoot. He hit 30% of his threes in 11 minutes, 4 points per game. He was out of the rotation, doesn't do anything else apart from score. The transition for him was pretty hard coming across from Europe, and I'm not really convinced that he is going to be a rotation player. I talked about all these guards in this team. I hadn't even mentioned Goodrich. That's how far down the rotation pecking order that he appears to be. Yuta Watanabe, another two-way guy, the 497th ranked player. He only played 18 games and 6 minutes per night. His G League numbers were okay. 17 and 6, a steal, a block, 1.5 threes at 36%. So showed some stretchability. He's a good free throw shooter. He can rebound okay. I think he's got rotation ability in the NBA. I don't think he's ever going to be a starter, but he is a player that I do like, and I think he can be an impactful guy at some point as a rotation guy, and he can be better than the 497th ranked player. Does that mean he can be a top 200 player? I think that's maybe pushing it. Top 250, I do think that there is upside for Watanabe, but he has just turned 26, so he's not young, and he's probably got 1 or 2 years to make this happen, and I'm not 100% convinced that he's going to do it. And then the last guy I'll talk about here is Jonte Porter. I discussed him at the start of the show, so I'm not going to get into too many details here with Jonte, but absolutely an analytics darling player, a long way to go, and in a deep dynasty, he is worth that risk. Guys, that'll do it for me today. Don't forget to subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. Tomorrow, I'll be back with the Orlando Magic show. So ask your questions on the Instagram story or over on the Twitter account, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.